guess I just want to start with one thing that John brought up, which I was thinking about in preparing for this. And I did not get to the point where I had all the research and I had a theory down. It was just sort of hypothesis, so I wasn't going to bring it in. But I believe John said that the tar sands take 6 times as much energy to extract and transport as you actually get. That's correct? Okay. Because I was looking, because what I was looking at was how this all relates to capitalism. And it occurred to me that you could take more energy extracting this stuff than you actually get, and it still could be profitable. Because you build an oil rig and it lasts 20, 30, sometimes they stretch it out even 40 years. And it takes a lot of energy to build it. Once you've built the thing, you can't just take that energy back out again, right? And you've built it with energy that was extracted far more cheaply, because as John pointed out, they already got all the easy stuff. So what we have is, we have this stored energy that no one can use, and it's being used to extract less energy than was there in the first place. And this is possible because of the irrationality of capitalism. This is not an efficient system. That's just a comment I wanted to start with. And everything that John talked about, I think, very much points to the fact that something very crazy is going on. And we could point to many different aspects of fracking that are terrifying. We could look at the poisoning of water supplies, stuff that's just outright toxic, stuff that causes cancer. We could talk about children passing out in their showers because there's natural gas coming through the shower head. We could talk about the way that the toxic sludge that is put into the ground is stored. The objective often is to just let the stuff evaporate into the atmosphere and carry all the toxins and everything else with it. But often it goes into the groundwater instead. I don't know which one is actually worse. But, hi.
Sorry.
That's fine. But yeah, sure.
I'm so
yeah,
sorry.
it's fine. It's fine.
Come on in and go with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it can. But I'd just like to take a moment to touch upon the earthquakes that are caused. When I first saw that fracking causes earthquakes, it sounded kind of like a far-fetched thing. But by now it appears that there are now hundreds of earthquakes at least that have been linked to fracking. And one study in particular that looked at dozens of earthquakes in Oklahoma, it noted that in Oklahoma, the rate of, I don't know what this figure means exactly, but it's m greater than equals 3 events, abruptly increased in 2009 from 1.2 a year in the previous half century to over 25 a year. So that's like almost a 25-fold increase, right? The rate increase is exclusive of the November 2011 M5.6 earthquake and its aftershocks. This is the important part for me. A naturally occurring rate change of this magnitude is unprecedented outside of volcanic settings or in the absence of a main shock, of which there were neither in this region. So basically, there is no other case of earthquakes happening at such an increased rate in a location like this. It's absolutely all about the fracking. You know, you're increasing the pressure, you're also increasing the lubrication between the tectonic plates. And I find this particularly unsettling because of other catastrophes we've had recently, like, say, Fukushima. I also think about Millstone. Millstone, for instance, you may know recently, it's the one nuclear power plant in Connecticut. The water was too hot to cool the nuclear power plant effectively, and they had to shut it down. It was the first time in history that a nuclear power plant was shut down that sits on, because the seawater it was taking in was too warm. There's a few others that have been done so for inland water, but never seawater. It's totally unprecedented and probably linked to global warming. So we're coming to a place where there's a lot of different, all these problems are intersecting. And it's very scary, and it's quite insane, and yet this continues on and on. And as I'd like to elaborate a bit, it's completely unnecessary from a rational point of view, which begs a number of questions. Well, you know, why does this keep going on? So for instance, just the other day, a new study came out finding that just 4 million wind turbines, totally feasible, could provide half the power for the world. There's leaving plenty more space for solar power, more wind turbines, and so on and so forth. This was from the National Academy of Sciences, and there's many other studies like this. They're always coming out. Scientific American had one, another group had another, and they all have different ways of looking at it. It's very clear that renewable power, not talking natural gas, not talking nuclear power, but wind, solar, some kind of hydrothermal, something else, but mainly wind and solar power, could provide all the energy that is used in a very short amount of time if we were actually to put our resources to it. We're talking, you know, World War II, they moved from cars to tanks within a few months. So this could really be done within years, if not months, right? And yet, not only do they not stop extracting natural gas and oil and coal and so on and so forth, but they're not increasing renewables at any significant rate. Now, this state is not been lost on people in general. You may hear the term a lot that we're addicted to oil. In fact, there's a blues song that just came out of New Orleans following the BP oil spill. I won't sing the lines because I just had a cold and I'll spare you. But I thought, you know, this one line was kind of interesting, among others. Oh, the world's just a junkie, all strung out on gasoline. Now they got boats out on the water, drilling in the deep blue sea. And as John pointed out, this is now the norm for offshore drilling. Now I think that a junkie is in some ways it's a misleading comparison, but at least in one essential way I think it's very relevant. Because like a junkie, hydrocarbons and the technology that they deliver never really solve the problem that they're after, even though they do, in the immediate term, address a problem that we're seeking to solve. And we need to use more and more, and yet they're less and less effective at solving the problem that we initially used them for. And yet, our entire socio-technological metabolism is more dependent upon this substance to the point where a break in supply, much less quitting cold turkey, could be catastrophic or even lethal. Now this, to me, this very much describes our situation. And I think we should ask why. And I think it has to think, it's very clearly has to do fundamentally with capitalism. So, first of all, what is a profit? A profit is when you spend some money, say you spend $10, and at the end of the day you have $12. It's kind of like magic. You have $2 more than you started out with, $2 profit. Now this is a society where you don't just have one or two people doing this, because that would just be kind of like theft, or, you know, actually it is theft, but that would just be theft from one part of the society. But we have a society where the majority of businesses are able to come out with a profit at the end of the day. And so that the entire society, if you look at how much money is spent, each year we have more money at the end of the year than we started out with. That's what so you have economists talking about growths in GNP or growths in GDP. And the growth really needs to be like 3% or you're in a recession, or it's got to be 2% or you're in a recession, right? So right there we see that capitalism is based on growth of some sort. What kind of growth? We haven't established that yet. We're not talking about growths in hugs, we're not talking about growths in love or growth in parties necessarily. But what's even more so is that in production, when we're producing material things like automobiles, all of the producers are simultaneously reducing their labor costs by introducing more and more machinery. And at the same time, the prices of the products that are produced with that machinery are dropping at the same time. So $1 worth of value one year is 2 shirts, and the next year it is 4 shirts. So that little bit of growth in GDP actually represents a monumental growth in goods produced, and even more so in the machinery it takes to produce them. So that's one part. I think that's one reason we can say that we see production growing and growing without any stop. But then, why is there not enough? Why are there a billion or so people who are malnourished? Why do even those of us who eat enough always feel like we're on the edge? Why is there not enough spare time? So on and so forth. Well, the other trick is that capitalism doesn't just produce, when you're in a capitalist economy, you don't just produce any old thing. You produce something for exchange. Something that is exchangeable for money. And if it's going to be exchangeable, it can't be in abundance. So the air around us is in abundance. Everyone in this room can breathe, and you don't have to pay any money. Virginia doesn't, charge us for the air in the room. Now, if all of a sudden the air was really polluted or something, and you had to buy oxygen tanks, well, there would actually be a growth in GDP. And someone would be making a mint off of those oxygen tanks, because there's a scarcity. Patents have the same effect, right? There's not so an idea, it's kind of hard to limit it, right? But if you make a law, you'll go to jail if you use this idea. Well, that has an effect of preventing everyone from using that idea, and it means that you can now sell it for the first time. This is something that is unique to a society like ours that is based on production for the market. And so for this reason, stuff that is in abundance is the enemy of the people who rule a society. They prefer things that are in scarcity. And stuff like oil and natural gas is the ultimate in scarcity. Because, so for instance, you might be able to privatize a plot of land and grow some trees on it and sell trees. Not everyone has land, so someone's going to buy your trees. Or maybe somebody else has land, but they're growing something else on it. But in theory, and this does happen, many other people decide to grow trees and sell the wood on their land. And so maybe they find a way of selling more cheaply than you, or maybe there's just a lot of it out there and you go out of business. But if you've got something like natural gas or petroleum, and everyone knows there's a limited amount, and you've got a piece of that, there's nothing like that. It's like a natural patent on petroleum. And if the technology is too expensive, the technology to extract and refine it is too expensive for anyone else to get, even better. Not only can you sell that petroleum, but you can make a rate of profit that no other industry can get. And then other people are going to invest in your business. And your business is going to grow, and you're going to have lots of money to do things like what Miles just talked about, like bribe politicians to sell you the trolley system so that people have to buy cars, so they have to buy petroleum. You can destroy a natural abundance, or abundance that already exists, so that people have to buy more of your petroleum or natural gas. And thus, your commodity becomes more and more central to the entire society. So, one of the essential reasons why we are so dependent on petroleum and natural gas, and why it is extracted at such high rates, is because it is so finite. It's not like, oh geez, this stuff is really finite, why are we extracting? I mean, that's what we think. Like, if something is really finite, we would see it as precious, and we would say, okay, let's use this really sparingly. Or maybe not use it at all. I mean, not even talking about global warming, right? But just because it's scarce, right? Maybe because it's not going to come back within our own lifetime. It's not going to come back within historical time. We're talking geologic time that this stuff forms. But for an investor, that's precisely the reason it allows you to extract hydrogen from water. Hydrogen is something you can burn, and when it's the only after effect you get is water. That was invented in 1800. Now these were both really primitive back then, but so is the amount of energy used. Both of these are decades before the first light bulb, before railroads were really extensive. So the only way to explain, so if this was a sane society back in 1839, people would have been able to say, hey, we got plenty of sunlight, we got plenty of wind, windmills are cheap, you know, sun's pretty cheap, let's make a society based on wind and sun. But no, it was a society run by profit in the market, and that's why we ended up the way we are today. The only way we're going to... So this is why it doesn't matter whether or not it's Obama or Romney or any of those guys, or even someone like Jill Stein, who is a third-party candidate, but who still bases all of her reforms on the market system and on capitalism and refuses to challenge it. Very sweet person, I'm sure, but it is why it does not matter which one of these people is in office. What matters is whether or not working people can go from exercising their power, as they did with the XL pipeline, as the students of Quebec have done in their fight to prevent a tuition increase, as the workers in South Africa have done, who faced dozens of deaths and won a 22% increase in their wages, as the teachers in Chicago have done, who pushed back to a very large degree an attack by Rahm Emanuel and the privatized education system. The only way this is going to change, and we're talking about eliminating $30 trillion in value from the economy, and then reorganizing everything else in a sustainable way, is if working people can go from an exercise of power to establishing their rule, which is the rule of the majority. It's the most basic thing that we talk about. It's democracy. But it's something that we do not have today. Because when working people do that, we don't have to worry about $30 trillion in value disappearing, because we don't have to play by those rules. We can play by the rules of thermodynamics. We can set up a society that we can actually live off of. So that's the challenge before us. And here's the thing, global warming is going to have its impact my lifetime at least, and we're also going to have to build a movement to fight for our survival in the consequences of that. And this is going to happen sooner or later. The question is, how prepared are we when it does happen? Thank you.